All manner of things shall be well. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. She is on her way. Another world is not only possible, all manner of things shall be well. On a quiet shall be well. I can hear her breathe. All manner of on her shall be well. Another world is not only possible, all manner of things shall be well. On a quiet shall be well. I can hear her breathing. All manner is on her shall be well. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. She is on her way.
morning. I'm the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, the minister at the Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Meriden. We're here at the Spiral Garden at the Meriden Church for this Sunday's service. We share missions as Unitarian Universalist congregations to create a supportive community, offer spiritual growth opportunities, and work for social justice. We are delighted you can be with us this morning for this wonderful service. We will be celebrating the Unitarian Universalist flower ceremony today. We'll be talking about Pride Month and Black Lives Matter and how they relate to the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Norbert Capek, the founder of the Unitarian Universalist Flower Communion. So welcome and come join in our service this morning.
We believe this time is made holy by our being together, even here on the internet. Being Unitarian Universalists, we begin our services by lighting the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. Join me in saying the words of our chalice lighting. This flame invites us to examine our part in perpetuating white supremacy culture and systemic racism. This flame inspires us to take pride in who we are and engage healthy practices of body, mind, and spirit. And this flame ignites in us a passion to radically welcome others, care for the earth, and proclaim Black Lives Matter.
By His Excellency Ned Lamont, Governor, an official statement. Whereas the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ communities are an integral part of Connecticut's population, and whereas the fight for dignity and equality for LGBTQ people is reflected in the tireless dedication of advocates and allies who strive to make this a more inclusive society, and whereas the state of Connecticut celebrates the diversity of its people and their right to live their lives out loud, free of discrimination, fear, and prejudice, and whereas the month of June is recognized internationally as Pride Month to commemorate the Stonewall riots of June 1969, when people in the LGBTQ community in New York City, at great personal and physical risk to themselves, courageously fought back against the increasing hostility and discrimination they faced from police at the Stonewall Inn, which was a refuge for queer people of color, homeless young people, and drag queens. And whereas Connecticut is proud to have led the nation in adopting laws supporting the LGBTQ community, including being the first state in the nation to enact a law through the legislature granting same-sex couples with the rights and responsibilities of marriage, and whereas the state of Connecticut remains committed to protecting the civil rights of the LGBTQ community, and whereas there remains much work to do across the world to protect the safety and security of the LGBTQ community against the threat of violence and discrimination, and whereas every human being has the right to live their lives openly as who they are, now therefore I, Ned Lamont, Governor of the State of Connecticut, do hereby officially designate June 2020 as LGBTQ Pride Month in the state of Connecticut. Signed, Ned Lamont, Governor.
Hi. June celebrates gay pride, so I thought I'd share a piece of my own gay history. When my wife Marty and I met and eventually decided we wanted to share our lives together, we also began to talk about having children. It was decided that Marty was the one who would carry the child, becoming the biological mom. Since there was no way we could legally marry at the time, we decided to establish our desire to co-parent this child by giving her my last name. She was born and we became a family in all the same ways that straight parents become a family when a child is born to them. But there was a major difference. That being, I was not considered Katie's legal parent. If anything were to happen to Marty, it would not be a given that I could continue to raise our daughter. There would also be the problem of signatures from legal guardians needed throughout the life of a child. At that time, I couldn't even adopt her unless Marty were to give up her parental rights. Not exactly what we were after, which was the safety for Katie until she became 18. It would be 5 long years before same-sex adoption would become legal in the state of Connecticut. When it did, I began the process of adopting our daughter. While the law was in place, the process to make it happen was not all that clear. The only thing the state of Connecticut could come up with was the stringent procedure of a home study, which had once been routinely used for heterosexual step-parent adoptions. But the court had long since stopped making that a requirement and people were allowed to waive these home study requirements for a step-parent in a heterosexual marriage. The norm had become only filing an application, a visit to family court, and it was done. But when I started the process of adopting our daughter, the state decided to incorporate all the original step-parent adoption processes of a home study, including veterinarian certification for our cats, well water tests, 4 to 5 pages of questions to be answered, a heating system inspection, on and on were the requirements, and also 1 or 2 home visits by a licensed social worker, which included talking to then 5-year-old Katie privately. But this all came with a price tag. Once this was all done and I passed, we went to see the family court judge, who issued an official certification of adoption. Katie's birth certificate was reissued with both Marty's and my name listed on it. Finally, she was saved from the unexpected, but only in Connecticut. Every trip out of state included packing a copy of her birth certificate and the official adoption papers. Eventually, Connecticut passed a law in 2016, 16 years after the adoption of my daughter, that allowed for the waiver of that home study requirement, the same as for heterosexual step-parent adoptions. Katie is now well over 18 and needs no special protections. But I become increasingly concerned for other gay couples wanting to form a family with children. When I hear of the federal government considering banning all adoptions of children by gay people, it feels like we may be sliding back in time when it was not a foregone conclusion that we have the same rights. Loss of rights for your gay neighbors, be concerned, speak up, even if it doesn't affect you personally. For it is a real possibility that many rights will be taken away, and that will cause real pain and a multitude of problems that we in the gay community thought were over.
In the city of Prague, in the land of Czechoslovakia, almost 100 years ago, in the year 1923, there was a church. But the building did not look much like a church. It had no bells, no spires, no stained glass windows. It had no organ to make beautiful music. It didn't even have a piano. It had no carvings of wood or statues of stone. It had no candles or chalices. It had no flowers. The church did have some things. It had 4 walls and a ceiling and a floor. It had a door and a few windows. It had some wooden chairs, but that was all, plain and simple. Except the church also had people who came to it every Sunday. It had a minister, and his name was Norbert Capek. He had been the minister at the Plain and Simple Church for 2 years. Every Sunday, Minister Capek went to church and he spoke to the people while they listened, sitting quietly and still in those hard wooden chairs. When he was done speaking, the people talked a little bit amongst themselves, and then they went home. And that was all. No music, no candles, no food, not even coffee or snacks. Springtime came to the city of Prague, and Norbert Capek went out for a stroll. The rains had come, the birds were singing, and flowers were blooming all over the land. It was beautiful. Then an idea came to his mind, simple and clear, plain as day. The next Sunday, he asked all the people in the church to bring a flower or a budding branch or even a twig. Each person was to bring one. What kind, they asked. What color? What size? You choose, he said. Each of you choose what you like. And so, on the next Sunday, which was the first Sunday of summer, the people came with flowers of all different colors and sizes and kinds. There were yellow daisies and red roses. There were white lilies and blue asters, dark-eyed pansies and light green roses. There were pink and purple, orange and gold. There were all those colors and more. Flowers filled all the vases, and the church wasn't so plain and simple anymore. Minister Capek spoke to the people while they listened, sitting quiet and still in those hard wooden chairs. These flowers are like ourselves, he said. Different colors, different shapes, and different sizes, each needing different kinds of care, but each beautiful, each important, and each special in its own way. When he was done speaking, the people talked a little bit among themselves, and then they each chose a different flower from the vases before they went home. And that was all, and it was beautiful, plain, and simple as the day.
The Unitarian Universalist Flower Communion Service, which we are about to celebrate, was created in 1923 by Dr. Norbert Capek, founder of the modern Unitarian movement in Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. On the last Sunday before the summer recess of the Unitarian Church in Prague, all the children and adults participated in this colorful ritual, which gives concrete expression to the humanity-affirming principles of our liberal faith.
These are the words Reverend Capek used to bless the flowers for his flower ceremony. He would say a prayer he wrote for this purpose, and we use those words today to bless the flowers this morning. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of thy most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship, but may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world. Amen.
Once I spoke the language of flowers. Once I understood each word the caterpillar said. Once I smiled secret at the gossip of the starlings. I shared my conversation with the housefly in my bed. Once I heard the answered all dying flake of snow. Once I spoke the language of flowers. How did it go? How did it go?
the crocus pops up, leafless stalk and purple blossom cup out of bare mud, as if it couldn't wait any longer. Not even the grass has ventured forth. Ice and snow could still return. What does the beloved care, so eager to begin again, to welcome new life? The dandelion, too. First, it's a plush sun. Then, before you know it, it's become a ghostly globe. And of its two forms, who can say which is more lovely? As if you had to choose between the glorious world and the words that resurrect it.
Our reading today is also by Reverend Capek. Something to think about. There is in every soul a thirst for something that is higher and greater than all science and art. We call it by different names, but in essence it is nothing other than a hidden cry for harmony with the infinite. Strong is the person who is conscious of the fact that the divine seed in them wants to manifest of the possibilities the great prophets and geniuses of mankind have brought to light.
Well, there's beauty here. I don't understand it. Can't comprehend the makings of it. But there's beauty just the same. And I love that it's wrapped up in this crooked little frame. And we might trip and fall on each other because we're tangled up so tight. But we'll just keep on loving each other until we finally get this right. Finally get it right. Well, it's hard work to love the deepest, to want to make a promise and then wanna try to keep it. But it's worth it to find the ones in life who want to walk the messy roads with you and want to try to get it right. And we might trip and fall on each other because we're tangled up so tight. But we'll just keep on loving each other.
My dad, like all dads, had a number of sayings he would repeat over and over and over again and again. One of them was, "You play the way you practice," meaning, of course, that if you don't practice well or enough, when you come time to play a game, you're not going to play practice, because he was an athlete. He was a star athlete in high school football and high school swimming. He went to college on a football scholarship, which he left. He dropped out and joined the Marine Corps. While in the Marines, he became a boxer. When he got out of the Marine Corps, he got a degree and ended up being a high school teacher and football coach. Later on, he took up tennis and ended up being a college professor and a college swimming coach and college tennis coach. He was, that coach guy. So it was always, you play the way you practice. And as much as I hated hearing it, it's really kind of true. You know, you think about it, if you're practicing something like tennis, you hit a backhand down the line over and over and over again, so that in the middle of a point you don't think about it, you hit as good a backhand as you can. In baseball, you do drills over and over again. Ground ball, throw to get the force out. So in the middle of the game, when you get the ground ball, you know exactly where to throw the ball, right? Musicians and actors are the same. You practice and practice your instruments so that in the concert you perform well. Actors rehearse the play and the dialogue and the dance and the action over and over again, so when it comes time for the performance, they hit it and do as best as they can. You do play the way you practice. The same is true of faith. We practice our faith so that when the time comes that we are called upon to really and truly live it out, sometimes under duress, we are able to do practice our social justice. We practice our ethics. We imbue the faith in and through us, so when the time comes and we are called upon to stand on those values, to take action upon those values, we have it in us to do so. The founder of our Unitarian Universalist Flower Communion, Reverend Norbert Capek, practiced his faith to a master level, technique worthy of the highest professional. When he was called upon to walk his talk, he did not hesitate. He knew what he must do, what faith demanded of him, what his own foundational values required, no matter what the cost or the price he might have to pay. Reverend Capek celebrated Flower Communion for the last time in June 1940 under the watchful eye of the Gestapo. Nazi Germany had invaded Czechoslovakia in March 1939, and Reverend Capek had remained at his post, declining an offer from the American Unitarian Association president, Frederick May Elliott, for Capek felt he must stay with his congregation. Capek's wife Maja was already in the States on a speaking tour, having departed shortly before the Nazis invaded. When they said their goodbyes as she left, they knew it might be the last time that they ever saw each other. And sadly, that services and run his church's education programming and other events, sometimes with German soldiers present. He spoke out, first subtly, then more overtly, against the German occupation. He took part. One can only marvel at the moral stamina, the spiritual toughness Norbert Capek was able to summon under the circumstances. Heartsick at the absence of his beloved Maja, who was speaking before audiences thousands of miles away about his work, trying to rally support for the cause of their spirit amid the enveloping gloom. Reverend Capek is an example of the type of courage you and I will most likely never be asked to call forth. We cling to our Unitarian Universalism as a spiritual refuge. It's a safe house in what can sometimes be a politically really that oppressed. Think of the Prague congregation Unitaria. Think about, would I come to church with the Gestapo standing at the door and in the sanctuary taking names, knowing that you might be on the list? The oppression got worse in Czechoslovakia in October 1939 after a violent protest against the German occupation. And in June 1940, Capek turned 70. The congregation gave him a gift of a short-wave radio, which came with the mandatory tag from German authorities that listening to and/or relaying foreign radio broadcasts carried the penalty of death. Of course, Capek listened and relayed the information anyway. He was first brought in for questioning in October 1940. He was released. He was not so lucky the second time. The Gestapo raided Reverend Capek's apartment on the morning of March 28, 1941, and spent hours tearing the place apart, confiscating sermons and writings and letters and books and other belongings. Capek served the officer in charge coffee refusing to be intimidated or denigrated. Capek and his youngest daughter, Zora, were arrested and charged with listening to foreign radio broadcasts. Capek was sent to the concentration camp at Dachau on July 5, 1941, where he was issued prisoner number 30323. Later, he was sent to Hartheim Castle near Linz, Austria, where he was gassed. Of all the stories, of all the famous Unitarian Universalists, Norbert Capek is one of my favorites. If we had saints, he would be one. He certainly would be one of mine. He was a former Catholic who became a Baptist, who became a Unitarian, seeking until he found that religion, his lifetime making a religious home for others who needed one the way he did. And finally, when called to stand on the principle there is no such thing as a lesser person, he stood and spit in the Nazi's eye. He had the chance to escape, but he remained with his congregation, living under the type of situation you and I only know from history books and movies and family stories of horror and war. The story of Reverend Capek is one of the reasons I am a Unitarian Universalist. And I wanted you to know his story today because the beautiful flower conviction and compassion, the type of person each and every one of us is called to be as a Unitarian Universalist. Reverend Capek's theology is summed up well in his flower ceremony. We are all uniquely equal like the flowers. There never has been, there is not now, and never will be anyone exactly just like you. You are holy, a gift, singular, and so is your friend, and your partner, and your family member, and that person you're not getting along with so well right now. That's how deep the symbolism of the flowers goes. Holy, a gift, important, valuable. So is every person in the Pride rainbow. So is every person of color. Every one of us a sacred treasure in our uniqueness, and yet equal in what makes us fundamentally human together. A single flower is lovely, a bouquet even more beautiful and grand. Flowers can be extravagant in a garden or bouquet of a kind, a field of bluebonnets, a sanctuary of Easter lilies, a bouquet of roses. Perhaps more extraordinary is a garden or bouquet of all types of flowers, or something that's a favorite of mine, a meadow full of wildflowers. There is always a force in the world that seems like it does not want the mixing of the wildflowers or of the different types of flowers in the arrangement, that insists on uniformity and on treating anyone who is an outsider or other differently. It seems there's always something at work that wants a scapegoat or an enemy to rally around in order to separate each type of flower only to its kind and then say which kind are valuable and which are not. And sometimes it's hard to see what that force is because it's easy as human beings to fall prey to it ourselves every now and then. You know, people still, and especially lately in recent years, ask how could Hitler have come to power? How could so many people have gone along with such genocidal prejudice? But is it really that hard to fathom? We're walking a tightrope like this now in our own country. And this situation happens among children and adults every day in schoolyards and offices and groups and clubs and governments. Happens whenever an us is created against a them, instead of remembering there is only we. It's what makes people like Norbert Capek so admirable. His ability to live out what most of us only talk about as our values. You know, who among us hasn't been told at one time or another, for one reason or another, you don't belong here. We don't want your flower in this bouquet. It doesn't fit. It doesn't look right. That feeling can make one wither and die. It can produce hurt and resentment that lasts a lifetime.
And in the worst cases, as Reverend Capek experienced, it can mean genocide and death. We are called to see the beauty in all the uniquely equal flowers and all the uniquely equal people in our lives and in the world. And this is what it means to be a loving people and a loving community. The flowers are indeed good teachers. Reverend Capek's most widely read book was called The Sunny Shore. It was what we would call a self-help book. And he taught this theology in that book, that we are all important and valuable. He knew what Unitarian Universalism still holds out to us, that every person, like the flowers, with sun and water and care and love, can all blossom. And the opposite is also true. Without love and care, and with some neglect and a little hate, all of us can wither. This message of the flowers is under siege. Our politics now becomes, if you disagree with me, you're not just wrong, you are evil. The only way out of this is to begin dialogue, even with those with whom it seems we cannot communicate well. We must try, for if we fail, the result is what happened to Dr. Capek, totalitarianism promising to make everything better by eliminating all the people and ideas those in power don't agree with. We are called to have courage. We are called to understand and speak that language of flowers. If we don't do it now, our task will become increasingly difficult to the point where we may be called to stand the way Reverend Capek was called to stand. We can make a witness to the world now about creating the world we dream about, or if we put it off, we may not get the chance later, and the witness may cost us too. We must engage in promoting the idea that we are all valuable, uniquely equal flowers. It's why we house people in sanctuary, why we funded the grocery store gift cards for our undocumented neighbors, why we work to make sure there is food security with the Woodbury Food Bank, and why we created SWIM. It's why we UU the vote and do notes for votes. It's why we plant "Hate has no home here" signs in our yards. It's why we show up at the State House in Hartford and in downtown Meriden and in Woodbury and in Southbury for Black Lives Matter. It's why we fly rainbow flags and host pride organizing conferences and get our designation as a welcoming congregation. We can create hope with the flowers. We can build community by following Dr. Capek's example. If we fail in building the world we dream about, I don't want to think about what comes after that. When people forget the language of the flowers, there are dictators and death camps. But if we remember the language of the flowers, there is always hope. We can continue to create a beautiful bouquet of community.
This morning, we offer a prayer using words from Reverend Capek. In the name of Providence, which implants in the seed the future of the tree, and in the hearts of men and women the longing for people to live in human love. In the name of the highest, in whom we move and who makes the mother and the father and the brother and the sister what they are. In the name of sages and great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of peace and justice, let us renew our resolution, sincerely, to be real brothers and sisters regardless of any kind of bar which estranges us one from another. In this holy resolution, may we be strengthened, knowing that we are God's family, that one Spirit, the Spirit of love, unites us, and may we endeavor for a more perfect and joyful life. Amen. My friends, we need you to be generous people. We need whatever help you can give to help produce these services, to continue to help our neighbors, and continue to help our members who are in need. Please be as generous as you can. We are deeply grateful for all you can give. At the end of our service, we put out our chalice. But we take that flame with us in our hearts wherever we go. May we carry that flame with pride. May we carry that flame so it helps us be true champions of our environment in the interdependent web of existence. May we carry that flame so it helps us say with feeling and genuine sincerity, Black Lives Matter. Thanks for celebrating this flower ceremony with us today. Go in peace, holy ones.